Her heel tapped once on the marble, then again slower, like a warning shot echoing through the ballroom. I saw it just that before I even saw her face again. That stiletto twist she always did when she was about to walk away. It used to mean she was headed toward me. This time it meant the opposite. I stood near the exit, one hand stuffed in my jacket pocket, the other clenched around a folded paper napkin I'd been pretending was useful for the past 10 minutes. The music had changed tempo. Softer now, slower, like it had some emotional insight into what was about to happen. She glanced over her shoulder. Just a glance. Not hesitation. No, she was already gone. But maybe reflex. Maybe guilt has a gravitational pull. He was still there. The man in the graphite suit, standing center floor, hand outstretched, 2 champagne flutes in one hand, and the kind of grin I hadn't worn in years. The kind of grin that didn't belong to husbands who ask what's for dinner and get told to microwave leftovers. She didn't come to me. She walked straight past enough that I caught the scent of that new vanilla amber perfume, the one I had asked about 2 weeks ago. And she said, "Oh, just something from a holiday box set." Liar. I didn't move, didn't blink, just said, "Casey, anything. If you go back out there and dance with him again, we won't be having the same talk later." She paused only for a second. Not enough time for regret. Just long enough to register my voice. Absorb it like a closed door absorbs a knock and decide she wasn't opening it. Then she smiled. Not at me. Not a happy smile. It was the kind you make when someone makes a mistake you expected them to make. And she went back into the spotlight, back into his reach, back to pretending she didn't once tell me I was the only person who made her feel safe in a crowd. I swallowed whatever words were growing in my throat and turned toward the hallway. Every step I took felt heavier than the last, like the weight of a marriage sliding off my shoulders in slow motion. Not crashing, not dramatic, just finally gone. And the funny thing is, I hadn't planned to be there at all. It started 3 hours earlier with a text she never meant me to see. 3 hours before that ballroom scene, I was sitting in my car outside of Walgreens, waiting for a prescription that had somehow become more important to me than it probably should have been. It wasn't the pills. It was the 5 minutes of purpose. Something to do. Somewhere to be. Something to check off the list so I could pretend I was part of a rhythm again. And then, my phone buzz. It wasn't anything unusual. Priscilla and I still texted, even if most of it had turned into logistics. "When are you home? Did you grab almond milk?" The dog puked again. That kind of married autopilot. But this notification was different. It was one of those glitch moments. The kind where 2 threads cross in the universe and give you a glimpse at something not meant for you. Her message came through on our shared cloud backup. A mirror sync from her iPad, which we both forgotten was still tied to my number. She must have been rushing because she didn't send it through an app. It came through plain and clear. "You didn't have to say that last night." He almost got suspicious. That was it. That one sentence, no name, no details. But my stomach dropped like I'd swallowed an elevator cable. I stared at those words like they were written in fire. Not because I knew exactly what they meant, but because I suddenly understood how little I understood anything anymore. She had always been calculated, not in a manipulative way, at least not obviously, but in the way people are when they've learned to keep part of themselves stored behind glass. Priscilla could make you feel like you were the only one in the room, and at the same time make you question whether you even belong there. I called her. No answer. Then I called again. Nothing. She texted back. "Can't talk. Rehearsal dinner just started." What? I didn't respond. I just drove past the Walgreens, past the house toward the Belvedere Hall I hadn't been invited to. I didn't know what I was looking for. Maybe I expected to find her working the room like she always did. Clipboard in one hand, earpiece in the other, perfectly composed. Maybe I just wanted to catch her off guard, not to accuse her, not to create drama. I just wanted to see her face in real time, to look into her eyes and find out if the woman I loved was still in there somewhere. When I arrived, I didn't even park legally. I left the car half crooked on the edge of the lot, hazard lights blinking like some kind of emergency I hadn't figured out how to describe. I walked in through the service entrance, an old habit from when I used to help her set up events years ago, back when we used to be a team. Inside, everything was gold and silver and soft violin music. Wait staff and black vests, guests with toothy laughs, champagne pyramids, and shrimp cocktails that probably cost more than our couch. I scanned the room and didn't see her immediately, but I did see him. I didn't know his name yet, but I didn't need to. There are some men you recognize without ever meeting them. The type who tilt their chin slightly upward when they talk, like gravity should be grateful they're still playing along. He held a glass like it was part of him, like he was born with it. And people looked at him, not just casually, but like he had weight. Then Priscilla appeared. At first, it didn't register. She was laughing genuinely, the kind of laugh that makes your ribs shift. She touched his arm lightly. He leaned down to whisper something. Her hand lingered. That's when I realized I was gripping the tablecloth beside me, and I hadn't blinked. So, I waited for her to step away, waited for a moment I could intercept without causing a scene. And when she finally turned toward the bar, I moved. I didn't walk fast. I didn't storm. I just moved. And then I said it. If you go back out there and dance with him again, we won't be having the same talk later. She didn't flinch. Not exactly. But she paused like a program buffering mid-thought. This is my job, Lel, she said quietly. I'm working. I saw the message. Her face changed. Not in panic, not in guilt, but in annoyance, like a child caught bending the rules, but convinced the rules were dumb to begin with. That wasn't for you. No, I said. It wasn't. She stood there staring at me like I was a problem she hadn't solved yet. Like I was the one out of place. Like I'd somehow wandered into her story without permission. And then she said something I'll never forget. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Then she turned. He was waiting. Her heel tapped once, then again, and she was gone. I didn't go home that night. I didn't even try. Instead, I found myself parked in front of a gas station 2 towns over, staring blankly at the neon buzz of a flickering open sign. I hadn't planned to drive there. My hands just kept moving after I left the ballroom, like some part of me knew that returning to the house, to that hollow shell of a place we once built together, was going to feel like walking into someone else's mistake. The silence inside that car was loud, deafening, and it kept replaying the same scene over and over. Like my memory was trying to punish me for showing up at all. The sound of her laugh echoing down that marbled corridor. The way his hand brushed the small of her back like he'd done it 100 times. The sheer comfort she had in his orbit. It wasn't nervous or guilty. It was practiced. I had been watching the movie of my own erasure in real time. It took me another hour to start breathing normally, and another after that to admit to myself that this wasn't some temporary thing. This wasn't an emotional misunderstanding or a fragile moment that could be patched up with counseling or a weekend trip or the right words. This wasn't her being careless. It was her being certain she had already left me emotionally, maybe even physically. The only thing she hadn't done yet was hand me the exit form. When I finally did go home, it was just past 2 a.m. The driveway was empty. She hadn't come back yet, or maybe she had and left again. I don't know. I didn't check the cameras. I couldn't. There's a special kind of agony that comes from watching a digital version of your heartbreak unfold. I wasn't ready to click play on that yet. Inside the house, the air felt wrong. Stale in places that should have smelled like her perfume. Too quiet in spots where there used to be humming or the clatter of coffee mugs or her footsteps in the hall. Even the dog had started sleeping in the living room lately. Like he too sensed that something inside us had shifted. I sat at the dining table. Our table, the one we bought together at a warehouse sale 8 years ago when we were still excited about things like mixing bowls and curtain samples. The table that had witnessed birthdays, burnt dinners, and long nights spent trying to figure out if we were ever going to be parents. I stared at her chair, the one on the left, where she always curled one leg up and flipped through her emails with a wine glass in hand. It was empty, of course, but in my mind, I could still see her there. Only, it wasn't her now. It was the version of her I missed. The woman who used to reach across mid-sentence and squeeze my hand for no reason. The one who used to wear my t-shirts and leave sticky notes on the fridge that said things like, "I love you more than Saturday naps." That version of Priscilla was gone. Or maybe she never existed. Maybe she was just someone I built in my head because I needed her to be real. I barely slept. And when I woke the next morning, the house was still empty. No sign of her return, no text, no apology, nothing. But something had changed in me overnight. A kind of stillness. Not peace, not closure. Just a calm that comes from knowing the storm you feared is already here. I opened her laptop. It wasn't something I ever thought I'd do. I hate snooping. I hate that part of myself that had been forced to become suspicious. But I had to know. Not for revenge, not for a fight. Just so I could stop waking up every day wondering if I was crazy. Her password hadn't changed. The desktop loaded. There were no love letters, no secret folders labeled Eric. But there were bookings, car services, hotel confirmations, transfers. Not for her clients, but for herself. There were email chains with someone named in D. Short-clipped exchanges, always professional on the surface. But there was a thread of familiarity woven through the tone, a kind of intimacy masked in efficiency. I clicked on one dated last Tuesday. Room confirmed for 6:30. Quiet corner. Same as before. And beneath it, thanks in, I owe you one. My heart was pounding again, but my hands were steady. I scrolled further. More meetings, more quick confirmations, always vague but always precise. And then I opened the calendar app. Thursday dinner with a 7 p.m. Please confirm, right? A not in another name. How many? And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just about Eric. This wasn't just one mistake, one inappropriate flirtation, one emotional misstep. There was more. Much more. And I was so late to the party, I didn't even know how many people had already danced with my wife. I sat there for a long time. Long enough that the light in the hallway shifted from warm gray to the pale blue of an early morning that didn't ask permission to arrive. Her laptop screen had gone black twice from inactivity. And still, I hadn't moved. Not really. I was locked in some mental loop, replaying every night. She came home tired. Every text that said meeting ran long. Every time she turned over in bed and faced the wall, suddenly everything familiar was being reclassified. It was no longer routine. It was evidence. I went looking for patterns. That's what people like me do when we feel control slipping. We look for structure in the collapse. I wasn't hoping to catch her anymore. I already had. I just needed to know how deep the roots ran. I opened her photos, not the gallery. She was too smart for that, but the hidden album she probably forgot synced across devices. I'd never looked there before. I had never needed to. That was something people did when they didn't trust each other. That wasn't us. Except it clearly was. It had been for a long time. There were dozens of them. Not obscene, not even suggestive. Just quiet. Too quiet. Photos taken from strange angles. Hotel bar stools, expensive shoes beside hers, blurry reflections of suited torsos and mirrors that weren't from our house. No faces, just parts, hints, context without identity. And I think that was the part that made my skin go cold. Not that she had done this, but that she had done it with such surgical detachment. She was documenting her absence. She was keeping trophies, not of romance, not even of passion, just of freedom, of control. I couldn't make sense of it. We hadn't fought. We hadn't broken. We hadn't even come close to some climactic explosion that would justify this slow, strategic dismantling. We were just us. Or I thought we were. And now, sitting in a dim room with nothing but the hum of the refrigerator to remind me I was alive, I had to consider something I never thought I would. Maybe I didn't really know the woman I married. Maybe I only knew the version she wanted me to see. The front door opened softly just after 7:20 a.m. I didn't move. She didn't call out. I heard her heels click twice, stop. Then the familiar rustling of her coat being hung on the back of the door. I imagined her scanning the room from the foyer, seeing the glow of the laptop screen still on. I imagined her heartbeat hitching. I sat there still at the dining table. The laptop in front of me, the air between us was thick, even though we hadn't said a word. Then came her voice, measured, but not quite calm. Couldn't sleep. I looked up slowly. Her makeup was still perfect, her hair pinned. She didn't look like someone who had just come from a hotel room or a late-night tryst. She looked like someone walking back into a set she was used to performing on, like a polished actress in a play that hadn't realized the audience had already left. "Where were you?" I asked, my voice low and dry. She didn't blink. "I told you." The gala ran long. I didn't respond. She stepped closer. "Lel, don't do this right now." "Right now," I echoed, a bitter laugh rising in my throat. We missed right now about a year ago. Her expression shifted then, not into guilt, not into regret, but into something else. Irritation, maybe, or fear of inconvenience. "I'm not having this fight," she said. "Not at 7 o'clock in the morning. Not when I have 3 meetings today." I pushed the laptop slightly toward her. The screen still showed the message. Room confirmed for 6:30. Quiet corner. Same as before. Her eyes didn't widen. Her mouth didn't drop open. She didn't gasp or cover her face or deny it with tears. She just sighed like someone being asked to explain an overdue bill. "How long?" I asked. She pulled out the chair across from me and sat down, crossing her arms like she was preparing for an interview, not a confession. "It doesn't matter," she said. "It does to me." She didn't answer right away. Then, almost too calmly, "The first one? Maybe a year. I don't know anymore." My hands started to tremble, not with rage, with some awful hybrid of grief and disbelief. "How many?" Priscilla tilted her head. "Lel, you don't want that answer." "I do." She hesitated, then shrugged. Actually shrugged. 3, maybe 4. It's never been about love. Okay, I wasn't trying to hurt you. And that was it. The sentence that hollowed me out more than any of the others. I wasn't trying to hurt you. As if that somehow made it better. As if betrayal without intent was less poisonous. As if the silent unraveling of everything I believed and could be neatly folded and filed away under. It's complicated. I stood up. She watched me like she was trying to guess what I'd do next. Cry, shout, collapse. But I just stood there. Because for the first time in months, maybe years, I wasn't confused anymore. I was empty. And emptiness has a strange kind of clarity. I didn't speak to her for 2 days. Not out of spite. Not to punish her. I simply couldn't figure out what words would even mean anything anymore. I walked through the house like a man visiting the place where his old life used to live. I'd pass a photo on the wall, her laughing with her hand on my shoulder, and wonder if it was taken before or after the first affair. I'd open the bathroom drawer and see her little jar of lavender cuticle cream, and ask myself why she still needed things like that when she was already gone in every way that mattered. She didn't seem faced. She still made coffee every morning, still dressed for work like nothing had happened. On Thursday, she even hummed while putting on her mascara, like we were just any other couple with a minor disagreement. Not two ghosts brushing past each other in the hallway of a shared failure. The silence between us wasn't tense. That was the worst part. It was practiced, like we had both quietly agreed to pretend this wasn't happening, because confronting it meant dismantling everything. And maybe that was exactly what she wanted to wear me down, to wait until I accepted this new arrangement, like it was just a shift in routine, just one of life's adjustments. Friday morning, she spoke first. I was sitting at the kitchen table, stirring sugar into my coffee out of pure habit. I don't even take sugar. She walked in fully dressed in one of her navy work dresses, heels already on, and leaned casually against the counter. "You going to stay mad forever?" she asked. I didn't look up. I'm not mad. She narrowed her eyes slightly. Okay, then what are you? I considered it. Detached, I said finally. She smiled faintly. That's rich coming from you. I looked at her then. Really looked. And for the first time, I realized something I hadn't dared let myself believe. Until that moment. She wasn't ashamed. She wasn't even sorry. She had made peace with who she was long before I ever saw the first crack. In her mind, this was survival. Maybe even evolution. She poured herself a coffee and sat across from me like we were having a normal conversation. She didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't ask if I wanted to fix anything. Instead, she said, I think we need to decide what this is going to look like. This marriage, she said without flinching. You know now you've processed it. So, what do we do? What do we do? I repeated, stunned. She nodded. Do we keep the house? Sell it? I mean, if you want to separate, I get it. But I also think that might be a bit dramatic. People work through things, LOL. I sat back in my chair. People work through arguments, not affairs. Not multiple. She was quiet for a second. Then she took a sip and said, You don't know that. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't married to a person anymore. I was married to a negotiation, a long, shifting contract of emotional terms she rewrote without my input. I had become a business partner in the management of our joint appearance, a man hired to maintain a facade. I stood up, heart racing. You want to stay together for appearances. I want to stay together for comfort. She replied without pause for practicality. Because divorce is messy and expensive. And because deep down you know, like I do, that we function fine, as long as no one asks too many questions. "Do you hear yourself?" I asked, voice almost breaking. "I do," she said, "and I think you hear me too. You just don't like what I'm saying." Then she got up, walked to the hallway, grabbed her keys, and paused just before walking out the door. "If you decide you want to leave," she said, "just be honest about it. But don't pretend you're shocked. You felt this coming for years. You just didn't want to admit it." And then she left like that. Like we had just talked about grocery lists instead of the death of everything sacred. I stood alone in the kitchen, sunlight crawling slowly across the tiled floor. And for the first time in my adult life, I genuinely didn't know what I was supposed to do next. I looked around the room. The fridge still had her stupid "don't forget the oat milk" magnet from last week. Her favorite mug sat on the dish rack, still stained with lipstick. The little fuss plant we got last year was leaning sideways, thirsty, but still alive. And I realized, so was I, but barely. I didn't sleep again Friday night. It wasn't that I didn't try. I climbed into bed around 11, exhausted, and stared at the ceiling like maybe if I watched it long enough, the answers would drift down from the fan blades. But instead, every time I closed my eyes, I saw that calm expression on her face. That casual shrug. The clinical way she said 3, maybe 4, as if I'd asked how many pillows we had on the couch. By 3 a.m., I was downstairs again, sitting on the cold floor of the laundry room with a bottle of water I hadn't opened, just breathing, trying to remember who I used to be before all of this. Before her. Before us. And the more I thought about it, the harder it was to draw a clear line between me and her. She was stitched into every corner of my life. And now those stitches were unraveling, thread by slow, careful thread. And then something happened that broke the stillness. A vibration, her spare phone buzzed on the shelf. Now, let me explain. Priscilla had a second work phone. Not secret, not hidden. She was transparent about it, mostly because her job required her to be reachable by high-profile clients, even when she was off duty. It was the phone that rang at 11 p.m., when some hotel needed a last-minute booking or when an event coordinator double-booked a venue. I never thought twice about it, but it was buzzing now, and she was asleep upstairs. I stood up slowly, picked it up. The screen lit up with a preview. "Hey, room 509 again." No name, no emoji, just that short sentence. I stared at it so long that my hand went numb. The message didn't need a name. I knew. I didn't know who it was, but I knew what it was. She lied about everything. Not just the scope of her affairs, but the timeline, the frequency, the intention. This wasn't accidental or reactive. This was curated, scheduled. I placed the phone back down and walked out of the laundry room. Not to confront her. I didn't have the strength for another calm dismissal. I needed something else. Not proof, not confirmation. Something deeper. Something that would help me understand how I'd let myself become invisible in my own life. I remembered something then. Something small. Something I hadn't thought about in months. Priscilla kept the storage locker. It started off as a practical solution. We'd moved from a larger condo into our current house 6 years ago. And at the time, she insisted on keeping some of her career stuff separate. Binders, boxes, extra supplies, lighting kits. She signed up for a climate-controlled unit and paid for it with her personal account. It wasn't secret exactly. She even offered to show me once. But I said no. I trusted her. I didn't need to check. But now, I needed to check. I waited until morning. I waited until she left for her early brunch with a colleague I'd never heard of. Then I took her spare locker key, the one she kept in the drawer behind the canned soups, and I drove out to the facility on Broadmoor. The place was quiet, just a sleepy guy behind the desk who waved me in without even asking for ID. I parked near the elevator, rode up to the 3rd floor, walked down the hallway, and unlocked Unit 3B like I was opening a door to a part of my own life I didn't know existed. What I found inside stopped me cold. It wasn't party supplies, it wasn't storage. It was a second version of her. A box labeled L, a name I'd never heard her use. Inside were letters, cards, even a small photo album. Her smiling next to a man in sunglasses by a lake I didn't recognize. Another with her sitting beside a Christmas tree I'd never seen. A wrapped gift in her lap. Dozens of tiny keepsakes. Concert wristbands. Receipts from restaurants and cities we'd never visited together. A folded-up paper napkin with, "See you soon." J scrolled in thick blue ink. I sat on the floor of that locker with her whole other life in my hands. And for the first time since this all began, I wasn't confused. I was furious because this wasn't about some moment of weakness or string of emotional mistakes. It was architecture. She'd built a second identity, a separate world with separate memories, separate people, and a version of herself I had never been allowed to meet, and she never expected me to find it. I drove home in silence. No radio, no podcasts. Just the low growl of tires and a growing sense of detachment from everything I thought was real. By the time I pulled into the driveway, I wasn't even thinking about confronting her. I was thinking about escape, but not the dramatic kind. Not the kind where you pack a bag and storm out with tears on your face. I was thinking about the kind of escape where you slowly disappear so thoroughly from someone's life that by the time they notice you're already a memory, they can't reach. And I think that's when the idea formed. A clean, quiet exit, but not without leaving something behind. I didn't pack a bag the next morning. I didn't slam doors. I didn't scribble a note or leave a voicemail. I made coffee like I always do. 2 scoops, 1 stir, no sugar. I showered. I shaved. I even kissed her cheek on the way out. She looked up from her phone, half surprised, half suspicious, like she knew something had shifted but couldn't quite name it. "Meeting today?" she asked casually. "Just errands," I said, and I meant it. But they weren't her kind of errands. They were mine. The first place I went was the bank, not our shared bank, mine. An old solo checking account I'd kept from years back. Originally opened when I did some freelance historical consulting. I never closed it because it felt like a tiny secret part of me existed there. Untouched by our marriage, I deposited half of what was left in my monthly paycheck. Quietly, no alerts would be triggered, no red flags, just a small shift in weight. Then I visited my brother. We hadn't spoken in a while, not because of a fight, but because life just got in the way. He was single, worked long hours, kept to himself. I asked him if I could crash on his couch for a few nights, no questions asked. He raised an eyebrow but didn't press. "Just tell me when," he said. I told him soon. Very soon. By noon, I was at a storage facility, not hers. Mine now. I signed a month-to-month lease for a modest 5x10 unit. I bought plastic bins from a hardware store nearby, enough for essentials. A few personal files. Some framed photos I'd already quietly removed from our home the night before and placed in my car trunk while she slept. She never noticed because people rarely notice the absence of things they don't value anymore. I didn't touch her stuff, didn't sabotage or expose anything. This wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming space, about taking back the parts of me that had slowly been absorbed into her lies. The L she didn't get to keep, the one she never really knew. That evening, she made risotto. It used to be one of her love languages. Now it was just practice. We sat at the table like nothing had changed. She told me about her day, a minor disaster with a florist, a meeting that ran long. She even laughed once, tossing her head back slightly as if we were still that couple who had inside jokes and matching coffee mugs. I nodded at all the right moments. And then I said gently, "I think I need some time away. Not forever, just some clarity." She blinked slowly. "You mean a break?" I nodded. She set her fork down carefully. "You're not leaving because of what I told you. You're leaving because you can't handle it." I paused. "No, I'm leaving because you never thought I would." She stared at me, studying my face. For a moment I thought she might argue, might cry, might ask me to stay. But she didn't. She just said, "Do what you need to do." And with that, I knew everything I needed to know. The next morning, I left before she woke up. No bags, just my keys, my car, and the kind of silence that isn't angry, just final. I didn't delete her number, I didn't block her, but I didn't tell her where I went. Instead, I checked into a quiet, short-term rental 2 towns over, a modest studio above an old bookstore that smelled like cedar and dust. The kind of place where no one asks your name unless they're writing it on a latte cup. And then I started writing everything down. Not for Reddit, not for anyone else. For me, I needed to see it in black and white. Not just what she did, but what I became while she did it. I filled pages with things I hadn't let myself admit in years. About the way her voice had started sounding more like a press release than a partner. About the slow erosion of touch, laughter, curiosity. About the weekends we stopped making plans and started orbiting separate screens. About how I convinced myself I was being mature for not needing more affection when really I was starving for it. By the time I reached page 15, I realized something that startled me. I wasn't writing about her. I was writing about myself, and not the man who found the text to unlock the storage unit, but the man who ignored the signs for years, who clung to a fantasy of loyalty because it was safer than confronting the truth, who wore disappointment like a second skin because anger felt too loud. And suddenly, for the first time since this all began, I felt awake. Not healed, not whole, but awake. And I knew that whatever came next would be mine to choose, not hers to define. The first weekend I spent in the rental, it rained almost non-stop. Soft at first, like a whisper from the sky, then harder, tapping on the tin overhang outside the window like it had something urgent to say. I used to hate the rain. It made the house feel cold, made the dog restless, made the walls shrink. But in that quiet studio above the bookstore, it sounded different. Honest, somehow like a kind of cleansing I hadn't known I needed. I didn't hear from her right away. No missed calls, no desperate texts, not even a passive-aggressive, "Hope you're well." But after 3 days, she sent a message that simply said, "Have you made a decision?" Not, "How are you?" Not, "I miss you." Just logistics as always. Control disguised as conversation. I didn't respond. Not out of bitterness. I just didn't have anything left to say to her version of the truth. Instead, I started waking up early, taking walks before the street lamps shut off, breathing in the smell of wet leaves and would smoke. I'd stop for coffee at a little shop where no one knew me as Priscilla's husband or the guy who never said much. Just another quiet customer with a notebook and a black pen. By the second week, I found a rhythm. I started working again remotely part-time, helping digitize city records for a university archive project. It wasn't glamorous. It didn't pay much. But it gave me a sense of direction, like I still had something to offer. I didn't shave every day, didn't answer every email, but I felt something return to my chest that had been gone for a long time. Breath. She sent another message a week later. If you're planning on ending things, just say it. Don't disappear. I stared at that one for a long time, and then finally, I replied, I'm not disappearing. I'm moving forward. There's a difference. Her answer never came, and that was the last message she ever sent me. It's been 8 months since that night at the ballroom. I filed the paperwork quietly through a mediator. She didn't fight it. I think deep down she knew it was already over before I ever walked out the door. Some marriages don't end with screaming. Some end with quiet realizations and final mornings that look just like any other. I live in a different town now. Still small, still unremarkable on a map. But my place is mine. I cook simple meals. I keep a plant alive on the windowsill. I adopted a dog, not because I was lonely, but because I wanted something living nearby that wouldn't lie to me with words. I see my brother sometimes. I talk to a woman named Renee at the bookstore downstairs. We haven't gone on a date yet, but we've exchanged playlists. She likes instrumental jazz and old Western soundtracks. She laughs easily, doesn't ask me to explain the past, just meets me where I am. And as for Priscilla, I wish her peace. Truly not the kind you ride out of spite, but the kind you whisper into the wind, hoping they find whatever it was they couldn't find with you. She'll never fully understand what she did to me. And maybe that's okay, because I do. And for the first time in years, I'm not trying to go back.